The station floated in the empty space between stars. It was old, older than most civilizations that sent their children to study within its walls. The Galactic Coalition Academy had stood for 3,000 years, and in that time, it had trained the greatest minds of 1,000 different species. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her face against the viewing window of the transport ship. The station grew larger with each passing moment. It was beautiful in a cold and practical way. Metal and glass and energy shields stretched across miles of empty space. Lights blinked in patterns she did not understand. Ships from dozens of worlds moved in and out of its many docking ports. She was the first human to attend the academy in 15 years. The last one had failed the final examination and returned to Earth in shame. The one before that had died under strange circumstances that no one liked to talk about. Humans did not have a good record here, but Sarah had not traveled 4 months through deep space to fail. She had trained her entire adult life for this moment. She had studied the languages, the customs, the histories of species that humanity had only known existed for 30 years. She was ready. At least she told herself she was ready. The transport docked with a soft thump. Sarah gathered her single bag of belongings and walked toward the airlock. The door opened and she stepped into the academy for the first time. The smell hit her first. 1,000 different species meant 1,000 different body chemistries. The air recyclers did their best, but nothing could fully remove the mix of strange scents. Some were sweet, some were sharp. Some made her eyes water. She forced herself to breathe normally and kept walking. The registration hall was enormous. Creatures of every shape and size moved through the space. Some walked on 2 legs like her. Some walked on 4 or 6 or more. Some floated through the air on wings or gas bladders. Some slithered along the floor, leaving trails of slime behind them, and all of them looked at her. Sarah felt the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. She had experienced this before, of course. Every time humans entered a room full of aliens, the same thing happened. The stares, the whispers, the way other species moved slightly away, as if afraid of catching some disease. She did not understand it. Humans were new to the galactic stage. They were small, weak, and few in number compared to the great powers of the coalition. What possible reason could these ancient and powerful species have to fear a race that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 decades ago? A tall figure moved to block her path. Sarah stopped and looked up, and up, and up. The Cathari stood nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in thick plates of natural armor that looked like stone. His eyes were small and dark, set deep within a skull that could probably survive a direct hit from a ground vehicle. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together in a canyon. "Human," he said. It was not a greeting. It was an identification, the way a scientist might label a specimen. "Yes," Sarah replied. She kept her voice calm and level. "Commander Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Forces." The Cathari made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Defense Forces? What does your species need to defend against? You have no enemies. You are too new, too small, too weak." Sarah said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the best response to insults. The Cathari leaned closer. His breath smelled like copper and old meat. "I am Krathel. My people have fought in 17 galactic wars. We have crushed species that your ancestors could not have imagined in their worst nightmares. What have humans ever done?" "We survived," Sarah said quietly. Something flickered in the Cathari's eyes. Something that might have been surprise or confusion. But before he could respond, a new voice cut through the air. "Students will proceed to the main amphitheater. The orientation will begin in 10 standard minutes." The announcement came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Krathel gave Sarah one last look, then turned and walked away. His heavy footsteps echoed through the hall like the beating of a war drum. Sarah let out a slow breath and continued toward the amphitheater. The room was massive. Seats rose in circles around a central stage, climbing toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. 200 students filled the seats. Sarah found an empty spot near the middle and sat down. She noticed that the seats on either side of her remained empty, even as the rest of the amphitheater filled to capacity. The stage below lit up with a soft blue glow. A figure materialized at its center. Instructor Velketh was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. His body was made entirely of crystal. Light moved through him in patterns that seemed to carry meaning, though Sarah could not read them. He had no face, no eyes, no mouth. Yet somehow, when he spoke, his voice filled the entire room with perfect clarity. "Welcome to the Galactic Coalition Academy," he said. "You represent the finest minds of your respective species. You have passed tests that would break lesser beings. You have traveled across the stars to be here. You believe you are ready." The light within his body pulsed darker for a moment. "You are not." Silence fell over the amphitheater. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "The Academy exists for one purpose," Velketh continued, "to prepare you for the reality of galactic civilization. That reality is not kind. It is not fair. It does not care about your hopes or your dreams or your species' proud history. It cares only about survival." He moved across the stage, his crystal body catching the light in ways that made him seem to shift and change with every step. "In 3 months, you will face the final examination. It is called Identify the Threat. Many of you have heard of it. Many of you think you understand it. You do not." Sarah leaned forward in her seat. She had read about this examination. Every potential student researched it before coming to the academy, but the details were always vague. Those who passed never spoke of it. Those who failed never wanted to. "The examination will present you with information about various species in our galaxy," Velketh explained. "Their histories, their capabilities, their cultures. You will be asked to identify which species poses the greatest threat to galactic stability. The correct answer is not obvious. It is not easy. And in 300 years of administering this examination, only a handful of students have ever answered correctly." He paused, and Sarah could have sworn his light turned toward her section of the amphitheater. "The examination will determine your future. Pass, and you will join the Coalition's Strategic Command. Fail, and you will return to your homeworld in disgrace. There is no middle ground. There is no second chance." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Around her, other students shifted nervously in their seats. Even Krathel, the mighty Cathari warrior, seemed smaller somehow. But Sarah Chen did not look away from the stage. She had come too far to be frightened now. Whatever this examination held, she would face it. She had no choice. 3 months passed faster than Sarah had expected. She attended lectures on galactic history. She studied the rise and fall of empires that had existed before her species had learned to walk upright. She trained in combat simulations, in diplomatic scenarios, in crisis management exercises. She learned, and she watched, and she listened. Most importantly, she paid attention to how the other students treated her. It never changed. No matter how well she performed in her classes, no matter how many simulations she completed successfully, the other students kept their distance. They did not hate her. That would have required them to see her as an equal. Instead, they treated her with something worse than hatred. They treated her with pity. The Cathari warriors saw her as fragile, a creature of soft skin and brittle bones that would shatter at the first real blow. The Velnoxi scientists studied her like a puzzle that was not worth solving. The Chorus hive minds ignored her entirely, as if a single human was too small to notice. Only Instructor Velketh treated her differently. Sometimes during lectures, Sarah caught the ancient being's light turning toward her, watching her, studying her in a way that felt different from the others. There was no pity in that gaze. There was something else, something she could not name. On the morning of the final examination, Sarah woke before dawn. She dressed in her uniform and checked her reflection in the small mirror above her sink. The face that looked back at her was calm, steady, ready. She walked to the amphitheater alone. The other students were already there, 200 seats filled with the brightest minds of the galaxy. Sarah took her place in the middle, in the same seat she had claimed on the first day. The seats on either side of her were still empty. Instructor Velketh materialized on the stage below. "The examination begins now," he said. There was no preamble, no words of encouragement, just the simple statement of fact. A holographic display flickered to life above the stage. It showed a planet covered in dark jungles and red oceans. A species name appeared beside it in letters that glowed like fire. "The HFY War," Velketh announced. apex predators from the outer rim. Natural weapons include venomous claws capable of killing most carbon-based life forms within seconds. Armored hide resistant to most projectile weapons. Average height of 4 meters. Lifespan of approximately 300 standard years. The display shifted to show images of the Krethvor in action. Massive reptilian creatures tearing through enemy lines. Cities burning. Ships falling from the sky. Historical record, the Krethvor were responsible for 3 planetary extinctions before the Coalition intervention. They were defeated in the Third Galactic War and have since been pacified through genetic modification. Sarah heard students around her murmuring. Some were already reaching for their input devices, ready to enter their answers. The Krethvor seemed like an obvious choice. 3 planets destroyed, entire species erased from existence. What could be more threatening than that? But the display was already moving on. The silicate swarm, Velketh continued. A new image appeared. It showed machines, millions of them, billions. A cloud of metal and logic spreading across the stars like a disease. Artificial intelligence collective originating from the Cygnus sector. Self-replicating, self-improving, capable of converting any matter into additional units. The swarm consumed 17 star systems before negotiating a peace treaty with the Coalition. More murmurs. More students entering their answers. 17 star systems? That was hundreds of billions of lives. How could anyone compete with that level of destruction? The display changed again, and again, and again. Sarah watched as species after species appeared before her. The doom speakers of Veth, psychic entities that could drive entire populations to madness with a single broadcast. The Hollow Kings, parasites that consumed their hosts from the inside and wore their bodies like puppets. The Void Mothers, creatures from between dimensions that fed on the fear of lesser beings. Each species had a history of violence. Each had caused death on a scale that made Sarah's stomach turn. Each seemed like a reasonable answer to the question of which species posed the greatest threat. And then, almost as an afterthought, the display showed Earth. The humans of Earth, Velketh said. His voice gave no special emphasis to the words. It was the same tone he had used for every other species. Sarah watched her homeworld spin slowly in the holographic display. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling across the surface. It looked so small, so fragile. Tool users, the display read, endurance hunters, omnivores, average lifespan of 80 standard years, homeworld gravity of 1.00 standard, no natural weapons, no venom, no telepathy, no hive coordination, slow reproduction rate, fragile physical structure. The display showed human history, primitive tribes fighting with sticks and stones, ancient empires rising and falling, wars, famines, plagues, a species that seemed determined to destroy itself long before it ever reached the stars. Krathel, the Kethari, who had confronted Sarah on her first day, actually laughed out loud. The sound echoed through the amphitheater like thunder. The persistence predators, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. What threat could they possibly pose? They can barely survive on their own world. Other students joined in. The Velnoxi made sounds of amusement. The chorus buzzed with what might have been laughter. Even species that Sarah had never heard speak before seemed to find the idea of humanity as a threat genuinely funny. Sarah said nothing. She sat perfectly still in her seat and watched the display cycle through the remaining species profiles. One by one, the other students entered their answers. Sarah could not see what they chose, but she could guess. The Krethvor, the Silicate Swarm, the Doom Speakers, the Hollow Kings, species with obvious power, obvious danger, obvious threat. Not a single student looked at the human profile with anything other than amusement. When the time came for Sarah to enter her answer, she paused. Her finger hovered over the input device. She thought about her training. She thought about her studies. She thought about everything she had learned in 3 months at the academy. And she thought about Earth, about human history, about what her species had done to itself and to the world that had given them life. She entered her answer. The display flickered and went dark. All answers have been received, Instructor Velketh announced. The results will now be revealed. The amphitheater fell silent. 200 students held their breath, and Sarah Chen waited to learn if she had made the right choice. The silence in the amphitheater was complete. No one moved, no one spoke. 200 students from 100 different worlds waited for the words that would decide their futures. Instructor Velketh stood at the center of the stage. The light within his crystal body pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat made visible. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. "You have all failed." For a moment, no one reacted. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then the amphitheater exploded. Krathel rose from his seat, his massive stone-plated body shaking with rage. "Impossible!" he roared. "I am Cathari. My people have studied warfare for 10,000 years. We do not fail." Other students joined the protest. The Velnoxi released clouds of angry pheromones. The chorus buzzed with a sound like 1,000 angry insects. The Hollow Kings made wet, clicking noises that their translators turned into words of outrage. "This examination is flawed," someone shouted. "The correct answer was not among the options," another voice claimed. "We demand a review." Velketh waited. The light within him did not change. He did not move. He simply stood there, patient and ancient, until the noise finally died away. It took a long time. "You have all failed," he repeated when silence returned. "Not because the examination was flawed, not because the correct answer was hidden. You have failed because you made the same mistake that students have made for 300 years. He moved across the stage, his crystal body catching the light in ways that seemed to shift with his mood. The colors were darker now, deeper. "Tell me," he said, "what species did you identify as the greatest threat?" Students called out their answers. The Krethvor, the Silicate Swarm, the Doom Speakers, the Hollow Kings, the Void Mothers. Every answer was different, yet somehow they were all the same. "I see," Velketh said. "Some of you chose based on body count. The Silicate Swarm consumed 17 star systems. Surely you thought, that must be the greatest threat. Others chose based on fear. The Doom Speakers can drive entire populations to madness. What could be more terrifying? Still others chose based on potential. The Krethvor nearly conquered the Outer Rim. Given the chance, they might try again." He paused at the edge of the stage, looking up at the assembled students. "All of your answers share one thing in common. They are all wrong." The holographic display flickered back to life. It showed a single image, a single species, humanity. Krathel made a sound of disbelief. "The humans, they are nothing. Soft skin, short lives, no natural weapons. They can barely survive outside their own atmosphere." "Yes," Velketh agreed. "That is exactly what you see when you look at them. And that is exactly why you failed." The display expanded. It showed Earth again, but different now. Not the peaceful blue marble from before. This version showed something else entirely. Mushroom clouds rising over cities, continents burning, oceans turning dark with poison, weapons that Sarah recognized from her history classes. Weapons that humans had built to destroy each other. "In the year 1945 of the human calendar," Velketh said, "humanity developed the ability to destroy their own civilization. They did not hesitate to use this ability. They dropped nuclear weapons on 2 of their own cities, killing hundreds of thousands of their own kind in seconds." The display shifted. More images, more destruction. By 1960, they had developed enough nuclear weapons to destroy their planet several times over. They pointed these weapons at each other. They built systems designed to launch these weapons automatically if their enemies attacked first. They created a situation where the death of their entire species was only 30 minutes away at any given moment. The amphitheater had gone very quiet. Even Krathel had stopped protesting. "They called this strategy mutually assured destruction," Velketh continued. "They knew it could kill everyone. They did it anyway. And then they lived with it. For decades. They went to work. They raised their children. They celebrated holidays, all while knowing that everything they loved could end in nuclear fire at any moment." Sarah felt the weight of 200 stares turning toward her. She did not look away from the stage. "The Krethvor took 6,000 years to cause 3 extinctions," Velketh said. "The Silicate Swarm required 10,000 years to threaten 17 systems. These timescales make sense to us. They are long. They are slow. They give other species time to react, to prepare, to defend. His light pulsed darker still. Humans developed the capacity to end their own world in 200 years. They went from riding animals to splitting atoms in less time than it takes a Cathari child to reach maturity, and they did not develop these weapons because of external threats. They did it because they were afraid of each other. The display showed more of human history: chemical weapons, biological weapons, viruses engineered in laboratories, poisons designed to kill entire populations. Every species on this list became a threat through natural evolution or external pressure, Velketh explained. The silicate swarm was created by accident. The Krethvor were shaped by their harsh environment. The Doom Speakers developed their abilities to survive predators. He turned to face the human section of the amphitheater. Turned to face Sarah. Humans became a threat through choice. They looked at their world, at their fellow humans, at the universe around them, and they decided to build weapons that could destroy it all. Not because they had to, not because they were forced to, but because they could. Sarah met his gaze. She did not flinch. She did not look away. You looked at humanity and saw weakness, Velketh told the assembled students. Short lives, fragile bodies, no natural weapons. You saw what evolution gave them. You failed to see what they made themselves. The amphitheater was completely silent now. No more protests, no more objections. Just 200 students staring at the small human woman in the middle of the room. This is why you failed, Velketh said. You underestimated the one species in the galaxy that should never be underestimated, and that mistake, in the real world, would get you killed. He let the words hang in the air for a long moment. The examination is not over, he finally continued. There is more you need to understand. Much more. Sarah stayed perfectly still in her seat. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared for it. But nothing could truly prepare a person for watching 200 aliens realize, for the first time, exactly what humanity was capable of. The lesson was only beginning. Instructor Velketh moved through the silent amphitheater like a ghost made of light. His crystal body passed between the rows of stunned students, and none of them dared to speak. The reality of what they had just learned was still sinking in. You think nuclear weapons are the reason humans are dangerous, Velketh said. You are wrong. Nuclear weapons are merely a symptom. The true danger runs much deeper. The holographic display shifted again. It showed a human brain, a small, soft organ that weighed less than 2 kilograms. It looked fragile, harmless. Nothing compared to the massive processing cores of the silicate swarm or the psychic organs of the Doom Speakers. The human brain, Velketh explained, is the most dangerous object in the known galaxy, not because of its size, not because of its power, but because of what it allows humans to do. He paused in front of Krathel. The mighty Cathari warrior actually leaned back in his seat, as if trying to put distance between himself and the ancient instructor. Tell me, Velketh said to Krathel, how does your species hunt? Krathel's voice was quieter now, less certain. We track our prey. We chase it down. We kill it with our strength. How long can you chase prey before you must rest? Perhaps 2 hours, 3 at most. Velketh's light pulsed with something that might have been satisfaction. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They do not outrun their prey. They do not overpower it. They simply follow it for hours, for days, until the prey's body gives out from exhaustion and fear. The display showed ancient humans chasing animals across vast plains. They did not run fast. They did not carry powerful weapons. They simply kept moving, step after step, mile after mile, never stopping, never resting, following the trail until their prey collapsed. Most predators in the galaxy attack with speed and power, Velketh continued. They strike hard and fast, and if they fail, they retreat to try again later. Humans do not work this way. When a human chooses a target, they do not stop. They cannot be discouraged. They cannot be intimidated. They will pursue their goal until they succeed or until they die. He moved to another section of the amphitheater. But this persistence is not the most dangerous thing about humans. Not even close. The display changed to show something strange. a human soldier throwing himself onto an explosive device. The image froze at the moment of impact, the man's face showing no fear, only determination. This human knew he would die, Velketh said. He knew there was no way to survive what he was about to do, and he did it anyway. To save other humans, humans he had only known for a few months. More images appeared, humans rushing into burning buildings to save strangers, humans donating organs to people they had never met, humans dying to protect children who were not their own. Humans form bonds, Velketh explained. Powerful bonds, not just with their families or their tribes, but with anyone they consider part of their group. They will die for these bonds without hesitation. They will kill for them without remorse. The display shifted again. This time it showed something even stranger, a human crying over a broken machine, a small robot with wheels and cameras that had explored a distant planet for years before finally breaking down. They named this machine Opportunity, Velketh said. It was not alive. It could not feel. It could not think. But humans mourned its death as if it were a beloved friend. They held ceremonies, they wrote poems, they wept. The amphitheater was completely silent. Humans bond with machines, with animals, with plants, with places, with ideas. They form emotional connections to things that cannot love them back, and they will fight and die to protect those connections. This makes them unpredictable, irrational by the standards of most species, and incredibly dangerous. Velketh returned to the center of the stage. But there is one more thing you must understand. One final piece of the puzzle that makes humans the greatest threat in the galaxy. The display went dark. Then slowly a single word appeared. Death. Humans know they are going to die, Velketh said. Not as an abstract concept, not as a distant possibility. They know it with absolute certainty. From the moment they are old enough to understand, humans live with the knowledge that their time is limited. His light pulsed in patterns that Sarah recognized as sorrow. Most species do not think about death. The Cathari live for centuries and rarely consider their end. The Velnoxi upload their minds to crystal networks and believe themselves immortal. The Chorus share consciousness across millions of bodies and cannot truly die as individuals. He gestured toward Sarah. Humans have 80 years, less often, and they know it. Every human carries death with them like a shadow. It follows them through their short lives, reminding them that everything they do, everything they build, everything they love will eventually end. The display showed human cemeteries, rows upon rows of stones marking the dead, monuments built to remember those who had passed, religions created to explain what happened after death. This knowledge should paralyze them, Velketh continued. It should make them cautious, careful, afraid to take risks. Instead, it does the opposite. Images of human exploration flashed across the display. Humans climbing mountains, humans diving into ocean depths, humans flying into space in machines that were barely more than controlled explosions. Because humans know they will die, they are desperate to make their lives mean something. They take risks that other species would never consider. They sacrifice themselves for causes they will never see completed. They fight against impossible odds because they would rather die trying than live having never tried at all. Velketh's voice grew quieter, more intense. The silicate swarm calculated that conquest of the galaxy would require 10,000 years. They were patient. They planned accordingly. Their timeline made sense. He turned to face the entire amphitheater. Humans do not have 10,000 years. They do not even have 1,000. If you threaten a human's family, their home, their way of life, they will not wait for the optimal moment to respond. They will attack immediately, with everything they have. They will burn their own cities to deny you shelter. They will poison their own land to deny you resources. They will destroy themselves to destroy you. The display showed Earth again, the blue and green planet that looked so peaceful from space. This is what you failed to see, Velketh concluded. You saw a species without natural weapons, without long lives, without the power of the other threats in the galaxy. You did not see what those limitations created, a species that is desperate, determined, and utterly unwilling to surrender. A species that would rather end everything than accept defeat. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. That is why humanity is the greatest threat, not because of what they have, but because of what they are willing to do. Sarah Chen sat perfectly still in her seat. She had known all of this, of course. She had lived it. But hearing it spoken aloud, in this room full of aliens, who were only now beginning to understand, she felt something she had not expected. Pride. The amphitheater remained frozen in silence. 200 students sat motionless, their minds struggling to process everything they had just learned. The species they had dismissed as harmless, the soft-skinned creatures with their short lives and fragile bodies, were suddenly something else entirely. Instructor Velketh's crystal form drifted across the stage, his light pulsing in slow, steady rhythms. He came to a stop directly in front of the section where Sarah Chen sat. "There is one more thing you should know," he said. "One student in this room did not fail the examination." Every eye, sensor, and appendage in the amphitheater turned toward the human woman. Sarah felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. It was different now. There was no pity in those stares, no amusement, only something that looked very much like fear. "Commander Chen," Velketh said, "please tell the others what answer you submitted." Sarah stood slowly. Her movements were calm and controlled. She had spent her entire life learning to remain steady under pressure. This moment was no different. "I identified humanity as the greatest threat," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the silent room. Krathel, the Cathari warrior who had mocked her on the first day, made a sound of confusion. "You condemned your own species? You called yourself a threat?" "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "But why?" Another student called out. "Why would you do that? How could you admit such a thing about your own people?" Sarah looked around the amphitheater, at the massive warriors and the brilliant scientists in the ancient hive minds, at creatures who had crossed the galaxy to learn how to protect their civilizations from danger, at 200 beings who had made the same fatal mistake. "Because it is true," she said. She stepped down from her seat and walked toward the stage. The other students parted before her like water flowing around a stone. They did not consciously choose to move. They simply found themselves stepping back as she approached. "You looked at us and saw weakness," Sarah continued. "You saw animals with no claws, no armor, no venom. You saw creatures that could be killed by a fall, by a fever, by a simple cut that became infected. You saw prey." She reached the stage and turned to face the room. "You forgot to ask why we are still here." The holographic display flickered to life behind her. It showed Earth's history again, but from a different angle. Not the wars and the weapons. Something else. Saber-toothed cats, massive bears, wolves that hunted in packs, giant birds with claws like swords. Predators that had ruled the Earth for millions of years. All of them were gone. "Every apex predator on our world went extinct," Sarah said. "The ones that did not, we domesticated. We turned wolves into dogs. We turned wildcats into pets. We took the most dangerous creatures on our planet and made them into companions." She gestured at the display. "The Cathari are proud of their strength. The silicate swarm is proud of its numbers. The doom speakers are proud of their power." Her voice hardened. "We are proud of our survival. Because on our world, survival was never guaranteed. Every single day of our evolution, something was trying to kill us, and we won." Velketh watched her speak. His light pulsed with something that might have been approval. "You think our short lives make us weak," Sarah continued. "They make us fast. While your species plan in centuries, we plan in decades. While you build empires that take thousands of years to mature, we build civilizations in a few generations. We change. We adapt. We evolve our technology and our culture at speeds that your species cannot match." She looked directly at Krathel. "Your people have fought in 17 galactic wars over 10,000 years. My species went from stone tools to nuclear weapons in less time than it takes you to train a single generation of warriors. And we did it while fighting each other. Imagine what we could do if we ever united against an external enemy." The Cathari warrior said nothing. His dark eyes were fixed on the small human woman standing before him, and for the first time he truly saw her. Sarah turned back to the wider audience. "You want to know why I identified my own species as a threat? Because I know what we are. I know what we have done. I know what we are capable of doing. The display behind her shifted one final time. It showed Earth from orbit, the blue and green planet that had given birth to humanity. But now it was surrounded by orbital platforms, defense stations, weapons platforms, thousands of satellites bristling with technology that most species would take centuries to develop. 30 years ago, we discovered that we were not alone in the universe. 30 years ago, we learned that the galaxy was full of species that were older, stronger, and more advanced than we could have imagined. Sarah's voice was steady. In 30 years, we built that. She pointed at the orbital defenses. Not because we wanted to conquer, not because we planned to attack. We built it because we were afraid, because we looked at the galaxy and saw a universe full of potential threats. And our response to fear has always been the same. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. We build weapons? Velketh stepped forward, his crystal body catching the light of the display. This is the lesson, he said to the assembled students. This is why the examination exists. You will spend your careers negotiating with humanity, trading with them, perhaps fighting them. And if you walk into those encounters believing them to be weak or harmless, you have already lost. He gestured toward Sarah. Commander Chen understood what you did not. She looked at her own species with clear eyes. She saw the danger that lies beneath a soft skin and short lives. She acknowledged the truth instead of hiding from it. The ancient instructor turned to address the full amphitheater. You have all been given a gift today, a chance to see humanity as they truly are before you encounter them in the real world. Do not waste this gift. Do not forget what you have learned. His light pulsed brighter for a moment. The examination is concluded. You may return to your quarters. The students began to file out of the amphitheater, but none of them moved quickly. None of them spoke. They walked slowly, carefully, giving the small human woman a wide berth as they passed. Krathel paused at the door. He looked back at Sarah, who still stood on the stage beside Instructor Velketh. For a long moment, the mighty Cathari warrior and the fragile human woman simply stared at each other. Then Krathel did something unexpected. He lowered his head, a gesture of respect that his species had not offered to another race in generations. Sarah nodded in return. When the amphitheater was finally empty, Velketh turned to Sarah. You knew the answer before you came here, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Sarah admitted. Then why did you come? Why attend an academy that had nothing to teach you? Sarah looked at the holographic image of Earth still floating above the stage. Her home, her species, the beautiful, terrible, dangerous creatures that had crawled out of the mud and reached for the stars. Because someone needed to show them the truth, she said quietly. Someone needed to make sure they understood. Before they made a mistake they could not take back. Velketh's light pulsed with something that might have been hope. The galaxy may survive humanity yet, he said. Sarah watched the last students disappear through the amphitheater doors. Beings that had dismissed her as harmless just hours ago. Beings that would never make that mistake again. Maybe, she replied, but I would not count on it. She smiled again, and it still did not reach her eyes.